Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society. My name is Brian, and I'm a member of this congregation, excited to be serving today as a worship associate. I'm joined today by one of our ministers, the Reverend Kelly Asprooth-Jackson, and the worship team of Linda Warren, Drew Collins, Stephen Gregorius, and Daniel Carnes. And a special welcome and thank you to the Society Choir. Thank you for being here today and sharing your music. At First Unitarian Society, we question boldly, listen humbly, grow spiritually, act courageously, and love unapologetically. If you're visiting us today, welcome. We're very glad you're here. If you would like more information about First Unitarian Society, feel free to stop by the welcome table, which is located in the Commons on the main floor to the left. Also, we hope you will be able to stay and join us for coffee hour, which is immediately after the service, also in the Commons. For those connecting with us virtually today, we're glad you are with us as well, and we hope you'll be able to take a moment and watch the announcement slides after today's service to learn more about upcoming programs and activities. Immediately following today's service, members of our FUS Healthy Congregation team will be holding listening sessions at the round tables, also in the Commons, and everyone is invited to join. And now I invite you to join me in a moment of silence to center ourselves and bring ourselves fully into this time as we join together once again in community. Welcome to this common, sacred space. Common because we are all welcome. Sacred because here we transform the ordinary and attend to the profound.
Do not leave your cares at the door. Do not leave there your pain, your sorrow, or your joys. Bring them with you into this place of acceptance and forgiveness. Place them on the common altar of life and offer them to the possibility of your worship.
We carry with us our regrets, doubts, fears, stories, laughter. May they inspire our worship.
Come then and offer yourself to potential transformation by the creative process that flows through you and all life.
Above all, may we each meet what we need most to find on this day, in this common sacred space.
And now I invite you to rise in all the ways that we do as we join together in the words of aspiration for the kindling of our chalice flame. May this flame, symbol of transformation since time began, fire our curiosity, strengthen our wills, and sustain our courage as we seek what is good within and around us. And now I invite you to turn to those around you and greet each other with signs of love and peace. like to invite forward now anybody who'd like to come up here and join me for a story. Hello. Good morning.
This is magical dust.
It's magical dust. Oh, very nice. Very sparkly. Hello. Hello to you and hello to you. Good morning. Yes. Well, good morning, friends. It's good to be with you this morning. Come on down. There should be plenty of room. Let's make sure that there is for everyone. You drew a chalice. Very nice. So I have a story, but first I have a question for you. Who here has heard the story before of the Wizard of Oz?
I have.
Okay. Yeah. That's about what I was expecting, like a lot of people, but not everybody. Yes.
The Wizard of Oz was the first movie to have color.
Did I know that The Wizard of Oz was the first movie to have color? I think I've heard that before. So, some of us have seen the movie, I'm guessing. Have any of us read the book? No? Yeah? A couple of us? Oh, you have the book. Very good. Yeah, so there, you may or may not know that the movie The Wizard of Oz, which has sparked so many other stories, like there's multiple. That's right. You got it. You got it. You're reading ahead, as often happens with the slide. Yes. That movie, which has sparked so many other stories, there have been books, there have been musicals. One of those musicals is soon to be a major motion picture, right? But there's actually a whole bunch of books in the Wizard of Oz series. They were all written by a guy named L. Frank Baum. And when I was some of your various ages, I read at least most. I was trying to figure out yesterday if I'd read all of them or just most of them. I'm not totally sure. But let's say a lot of the various Wizard of Oz, Land of Oz books. Now, characters in the Wizard of Oz that we can think of. Who do we got? Obviously, the Wizard of Oz, right? That's a character in the Wizard of Oz. Who else? Dorothy. Yeah, Dorothy. She's our hero. The Tin Man. The Lion, right? The Scarecrow. The Wicked Witch. Yes. All these people are characters in the story of the Wizard of Oz.
We know the Munchkins.
And the Munchkins. I mean, there's a lot. There's the horse of a different color. We could get pretty deep on this. Yes. And yeah. So, one of them is the Tin Man, for those of you who are reading ahead on the slide. And I have a little story for you. Does anybody know how the Tin Man got to be the Tin Man? Because that's my story for you today, is how did the Tin Man get to be the... Well, yeah, it's a gradual process. So let's go, okay, you really want to tell us. So what do you got? Yes.
He was chopping wood, but the witch enchanted a spell onto his axe, so he keeps chopping his body parts off, and the doctor keeps replacing it with tin, but they forgot to add him a heart, and he shouldn't be alive.
So let me repeat it so that everybody can hear. So in the story, remembering that this is a story and not a work of real documentary truth, right? Remembering this is a story. In the story, he was a regular human woodcutter, right? He had an axe, he chopped down trees, he cut firewood for people, and he was cursed by a witch. As a reminder, there are both good and bad witches in the Wizard of Oz story, just, to disrupt our maybe reflexive opinion about all witches being bad, right? There's a mixture of witches. This witch, though, not a nice witch, cursed his axe, thank you for the correction, yes, cursed his axe so that when he swung it, it would chop off one of his limbs. And so eventually, through the process of returning to swing the axe over and over again, someone yesterday said, why didn't he get another axe? Good question. And being assisted by someone who was somewhere between a doctor and an inventor, who replaced each missing part. Each time that he lost a new part, he replaced it with a metal part instead. And by the end of that process, there was just metal left. Yes? How is he still alive? Well, it's magic, basically, is the answer. I don't really have a better answer for you than that. Well, so here's the question, right? So in the story, there's a lot to do with him not having a heart, right? That's his whole focus when he meets Dorothy. A heart made out of tin, perhaps? Well, everything else is made out of tin, so that would make sense if he had a heart made out of tin, right? So here is my question for you. Now that maybe you already knew, or now that you know, the the origin of the Tin Man, right? So if by the end of the process he starts out being made out of flesh and blood, just like you and I, right? By the end of the process, he's all metal. The question I have for you, and it's a real question, I'm curious to know your opinion about this. Was he the same person at the end of that? Right, he starts out being made out of bone and blood like us. He ends up being just made out of metal. Is he still the same person? He probably shouldn't be alive. We've addressed this, right? That's because of the magic. Yes. What do you think? You think he is because he still acts the same way. I can definitely see that line of argument, and yes.
How does he control any of the metal parts of his body?
Well, he's sort of like a robot, basically, by the end of it. He's a little bit, the story was written a long enough time ago that there wasn't a great concept about robots, but that's pretty much what it ended up being. Anybody want to make an argument for why he wasn't the same person after he was all metal? Technically, he's both. He's both the same person and a different person. Okay, I can see the argument. Yeah. So, yes? Why is he made out of tin anyway? Yeah, because tin is a soft metal that's easy to work, and there used to be a whole field of profession around being a tinsmith, someone who can make useful things for other people, tools and that sort of stuff, out of tin. So that's probably why the author chose tin as the material. So if you know the story of the Wizard of Oz, do you remember what happens for the Tin Man at the end? Do you remember what the conclusion is? Because he spends the whole story, or at least his whole part of the story, wishing for a heart. And what happens? Well, he gets like a paper heart or a cardboard heart. Yes, he gets something that's like a heart. But do you remember how things work with all the things that the wizard gives out at the end? They're not real replacements, right? They're just kind of reminders that the people, right, that they already had that thing within them, right? The scarecrow gets a degree, but the degree doesn't give him new knowledge. He already had a brain. Well, yeah, I mean, it could be beneficial to study, sure. But let it go forth from this time and place that the reason to go to college is not specifically just to get a diploma. How about that? Yes.
Why does he always wish for a heart?
Well, because he thinks that he doesn't have one. And he thinks that he doesn't have feelings. But in the course of the story, what does he do? He shows time and again that he cares about other people. He cares about Dorothy and his other friends. He wants to help them. He wants to protect them. So by the end, he learns that he doesn't actually need a new heart. He already had those feelings within him. He was already acting like the same person, just like you said. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about the Tin Man with you this morning. Now we're going to sing you to your classes.
I'm starting to develop a theory of Star Wars being an analog of the Wizard of Oz. The Tin Man would have to be Darth Vader, though, in that. Let's rise in body and in spirit and sing hymn number 16, "'Tis a Gift to be Simple." We'll sing through it twice. "'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be, and when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight.
It takes many different moments strung together to make a journey. Even the short ones can have struggles and challenges. Times when we speed on forward and times when we dawdle behind. Times to notice, times to remember, and times to release. And times to rest. Those can be quite lovely, but in a busy world, we don't always have the opportunity to quiet our bodies and our thoughts all at once, even when we really need to. So now, to encourage and support each other in our own personal practice of respite and pause, let us spend this moment together, resting in reverent quiet. Amen. As we begin together a month in which our spiritual theme is transformation, I want to talk with you about transformation of a sort that may not be the first one that comes to mind for you. Transformation not as a force for destruction of what came before, but for its preservation. A means of maintaining the link with the past through change, not despite it. In the stories and traditions of ancient Greece, Theseus was a demigod and the mythic hero of the city of Athens. Probably the most famous of his stories begins with the subjugation of Athens to King Minos of Crete. Every so many years, the Athenians were required to send their 14 most promising teenagers to Crete as tribute to Minos, never to return. Theseus liberated them from this cycle. He traveled to Crete and slew the Minotaur, the monster with the body of a man and the head of a bull, to whom the captive youths from Athens were to be sacrificed. The safe return of their children made Theseus their hero and eventually their king. The ship on which he returned from Crete became a sacred object, protected and maintained by the Athenian state. And while the story of Theseus is a mythological one full of magic and monsters and the intervention of multiple Greek deities, there is at least some evidence for a real, literal ship. It is attested to by Plutarch, the Roman historian, for example, that for centuries there was a craft in the harbor of Athens, believed by all the people to be the ship of Theseus. Each year it was used to undertake a special religious voyage to honor the god Apollo, who had aided Theseus in his mission, according to the tale. Because it was such a precious heirloom, and because it had such a special annual purpose, it was necessary that the ship be maintained and kept seaworthy. Ropes, sails, boards, and nails, all of the component parts of such a craft decay over time, particularly when it is kept in the water and put to continuous use. So maintaining the ship meant replacing its components gradually and only as often as was called for, of course. This raised a question that you may already be asking yourself. Once some, or most, or all of the pieces of that ship which supposedly carried Theseus from Crete had been replaced, was it still the ship of Theseus? This led to the boat, or at least its idea, becoming a sort of exemplary thought experiment for ancient thinkers, still sometimes invoked all the way down to the present day. Plutarch records that this ship became a standing example among the philosophers for the logical question of things that grow, one side holding that the ship remained the same and the other contending that it was not. Our much lauded spiritual ancestor, Ralph Waldo Emerson, said this in his essay, Circles. In nature, every moment is new. The past is always swallowed and forgotten. The coming only is sacred. Nothing is secure but life, transition, the energizing spirit. No love can be bound by oath or covenant to secure it against a higher love. No truth so sublime, but it may be trivial tomorrow in the light of new thoughts. People wish to be settled. Only as far as they are unsettled is there any hope for them. The oracle of Concord here is, as ever, a powerful voice for the new, for change, for the leaving behind of what has been and the embracing of what might be. Such openness to and even celebration of change is a major theme in our tradition as Unitarian Universalists. Emerson is among its greatest advocates, but not even the first or the only. And as I remind myself each time that I consider his ardent moral counsel deeply, as I often do, he was also bad at being a minister. His one pastorate was brief, and we cannot say successful. He was much better suited to being a public intellectual than to being the spiritual leader of a religious community. This does not mean that his ideas were bad, but it may suggest that some of them needed to be tempered in order to be put into practice with and among other people. Let's consider carefully just one line from the passage I quoted you. No love can be bound by oath or covenant to secure it against a higher love. Okay. True enough, life is full of decisions between competing principles and sometimes competing loves. Deciding which is the highest and the best impulse to pursue in any given situation is the essence of all moral reasoning. But our oaths and our covenants, the promises that we make to and with each other, these things can shape which competing love is actually the greater one for us. And they can also guide and contour the progress of personal change rather than standing in the way of it. The bond between a parent and a child in the cases where such bonds are nurturing and life-giving, must necessarily change over a long enough timeline. This is the eternal cycle. A child is born, dependent on its caregivers for all the material needs of life. Years go by, and the parent and child must learn to relate to each other both as adults now. For love to persist, the rhythm and the ritual of the relationship must change. Then, finally, there comes a time near the end of their life when parent looks to child for all those same material needs. The time comes for the provider to receive and for the receiver to provide. Not every relationship between parent and child looks like this, but when fate and open-heartedness allow it to, it is a beautiful thing. More, perhaps, to the obvious point, marriages and other committed romantic partnerships are grounded in oaths and promises. And the ones which last endure because the commitment is not to be unchanging, which is impossible, but to work to change together. To grow in complementary ways, in a shared direction rather than away from each other. In a much less intimate way, this is the same sort of promise that binds a religious community together, particularly a freely gathered one like ours. Not to stay forever the same, but to seek growth which is mutual, change which is complementary, and new ways of being together that honor the essence of the old. The Ise Grand Shrine is the most sacred site in the Shinto tradition, the indigenous animistic faith of Japan, which was its state religion until the end of World War II. At its heart is a building devoted to the sun goddess Amaterasu, which is off limits to nearly everyone. Only the highest religious officials are allowed beyond the tall privacy fence that surrounds it. This is, reportedly, the repository of Yata no Kagami, the sacred bronze mirror said to have been given by the gods to the first emperor of Japan. At the height of its religious significance between the 16 and the 1800s, it is estimated that 1 in every 10 Japanese people made a pilgrimage to Ise at least once in their lives. The great poet Basho is known to have been among them, as he wrote this poem about the place. Behind Ise Shrine, unseen, hidden by the fence, Buddha sees nirvana. That fenced-off inner shrine is notable in part because it is both permanent and temporary. The Ise Shrine complex has existed in some form for at least 1,300 years, and every 20 years, its most sacred structures are torn down completely and replaced. At any given time, that inner sanctum, the fenced-off area, has one holy structure inside of it and an entirely separate, empty area right next to it, marked off with white stones. This is where the replacement will be built at the end of the 20-year cycle. Although the plot is mostly empty, there is a small hut in the middle of it. This hut surrounds the sacred center of where the shrine has been and will be again, so that the Holy of Holies is never exposed to the open air and can never be seen by anyone other than those it is reserved to. When the next shrine is built, it will be built around the hut before that structure is disassembled. The reconstruction of the shrine every 2 decades is meticulous, as you might guess, and great care is taken to make sure that the new structure looks just like the old one. Indeed, the materials, the method of construction, and much of the design of the building seem traceable all the way back to the beginning of the shrine's history. In fact, the shrine's periodic construction projects have helped to preserve an entire school of sacred carpentry. Among other considerations, nails cannot be used, so the joining methods are much more inventive and intricate. In all, the process of planning, gathering materials, and doing the preliminary craft work for the 5 times per century deconstruction and reconstruction takes about 17 years. So that the newest incarnation of the shrine is barely finished before work on the next one begins. But that does not mean that the building today is exactly the same as the one that would have stood there 13 centuries ago. Over time, stylistic changes and adornments have crept in. The influence of Buddhist religious architecture has resulted in new features on the outside of the building. Likely these changes were gradual, but still, it must have been noteworthy each time that even a single thing was added to or subtracted from the design. That particular year, that particular rebuilding, there must have been debate, there must have been disagreement, there must have been dismay. But the next time the building was rebuilt, all of those changes, whatever they might have been, were just part of the design and just as much in need of protection and careful recreation as every other part of the structure. The contemporary psychologist Daniel Gilbert says that human beings are works in progress that mistakenly think they're finished. The person you are right now is as transient, as fleeting, and as temporary as all the people you've ever been. The one constant in our lives is change. The same idea of being permanent while actually being fundamentally impermanent would be just as mistaken if applied to a community as to a person. Every group is a work in progress. Now, as I said at the outset, our spiritual theme for this month is transformation, and this is also the time of our annual pledge campaign, when we are all called upon to consider the importance of this particular community in our lives, the place we see ourselves as having in it, and to move from this in sharing what we have into the resources that we hold in common. As you make your own consideration about this over the coming weeks, and even if you've already made your decision, or you've made an ongoing commitment years ago, I want to introduce to you a concept from Japan. It is the idea behind the 20-year replenishment of the Issei Shrine. It is also, I think, a fair explanation of the motivation behind the maintenance of the ship of Theseus. The word for it in Japanese is tokowaka. This is often translated into English as eternal youth, although it is not meant in the Ponce de Leon fairy tale quest sort of way. Another more poetic way of describing it might be renewal in pursuit of permanence. Certain things are so precious that we wish for them to last. The determination to prevent all change is not a strategy to protect such things. In truth, that could only condemn them to a swift decay. But it is a careful and intentional process of transformation. Transformation into something which preserves the most precious and essential qualities of the beloved object. This makes the lifespan of finite things infinite, bounded only by our love for them and by our determination to work from that love. William Lawrence Sullivan was a one-time Roman Catholic priest, notable for having written the last work by an American ever to be placed on the Vatican's list of prohibited books. Perhaps unsurprisingly, he left the Catholic clergy and eventually became a Unitarian minister. He wrote these words, which I find to resonate with the theme of Toko Waka, at least as it relates to our mostly change-loving tradition as Unitarian Universalists. To outgrow the past, but not extinguish it. To be progressive, but not raw. Free, but not mad. Critical, but not sterile. Expectant, but not deluded. To be scientific, but not to live on formulas that cut us off from life. To hear amidst clamor the pure, deep tones of the Spirit. To seek the wisdom that liberates and a loyalty that consecrates. To turn both prosperity and adversity into servants of character. To master circumstances by the power of principle, and to conquer death by the splendor of loving trust. This is to attain peace. This is to pass from drear servitude to divine adoption. This is to invest the lowliest life with magnificence and to prepare it for coronation.
Hear my cry.
Thank you so much for that beautiful music. And now I would like to invite forward Patty Whitty to share a perspective in support of our annual stewardship campaign.
Hello, my name is Patty Whitty, and I may not look familiar because I usually come to the 11 a.m. service. Sorry about that. I was missing all of your smiling faces, and I'm so glad to be here today. I appreciate the chance to tell my personal journey here to FUS and why FUS is so important to me. I was born and raised in Madison, grew up on the west side, going to a Methodist church. In college, I left that church. And in 1991, I moved to Milwaukee for medical school. I was gone for 20 years. During that time, I found Unitarian Universalism. And to me, Unitarian Universalism is a congregation that is welcoming and is knowledge, but there's knowledge from so many different spiritual traditions that it's just an amazing gathering to me. During the time that I was gone, I was in Appleton at a member that had a membership of about 250 members. I was in Farmington, New Mexico, where there was 36 members. And when I moved back to Madison in 2011, I knew I wanted to join another UU church. And so the thing is that I first came to First Unitarian Society because my cousin had been married here in the 70s, and because of the Landmark Auditorium. And so the thing is that it was about 1,500 members at that time, and so I felt a little lost. And so what I did was I was able to join a group called Quest, which helped with a spiritual journey, and I met 30 people that way. I joined choir, met 50 people that way. I started volunteering for the homeless dinners when we did those down at Grace Episcopal Church. And so suddenly I was a member of this community. So when I decide how much money to give, I was at Fox Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship when Reverend Bierkhausen was there, and he did a sermon that talked about we're not a membership that says you have to tithe, you have to give 10%. He suggested 3%, and when I was working as a physician, that was a reasonable amount and it was a chunk of change, but it was very doable. In 2018, I became disabled, but I maintained that commitment. When it became clear a year later that I was not able to return to work, they allowed me to back off on my donation, but I continued being a sustaining member. Over time, each year, I have tried to give a little more. Whether it's $10 a month, $25 a month, I don't need to go out to eat so often. I need First Unitarian Society. I appreciate all of you being here, and I appreciate being able to be a part of FUS not only surviving, but thriving. Thank you for your time.
And now I invite you into this time of giving and receiving, where we give freely and generously to this offering, which sustains and strengthens our community here, as well as our outreach offering recipient, who this week is Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, which provides affordable, quality, confidential healthcare to thousands of people each year in 24 health centers throughout Wisconsin. Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin focuses on preventative care, including birth control, testing, and treatment for sexually transmitted infections, and screenings for cancers, seeking to ensure all people have access to the care and resources they need to make informed decisions about their bodies, their lives, and their futures. And on a particular note to our community, among their numerous services, Planned Parenthood has sent educators to speak with the teens in our Mind, Body, and Soul classes each year for more than 16 years. There are multiple ways to share your gifts this morning. Baskets are now being passed here in the auditorium for cash or checks, or as you will see on the screen, you can donate directly from our website, fusmadison.org. You'll also see our text to give information there. We thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life we create together.
Each week we gather, carrying with us the joys and losses of our days. We hold our own pain and celebration together with those of the ones we love. We share these here, knowing they are held gently in care and in support and in love. Larry Newman asks us to light a candle of care and gentle thought for Don Regina, who entered a Grace Hospice this week. We light a candle of ongoing lament for the violence which plagues our world. Fervently we yearn for peace here at home and around the globe. And we light a candle for all those joys and sorrows, hopes and dreams that remain unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. I invite you now to turn with me both inward and outward as we enter together into an attitude of meditation and of prayer with these words of blessing from Lynn Cox. Creative Spirit, source of life and love, we give thanks for the beauty of this day and for the company of those assembled here. Thank you for the breezes of change, clearing our heads and bringing fresh ideas. May they cleanse our minds of the oppressions and isms that divide us. Thank you for the flame of hope, the heat of righteous anger, the warmth of compassion, and the fire of commitment. May they bubble the cauldrons of transformation. Thank you for oceans of love, rivers of connection, tears of relief, and pools of serenity. May healing waters flow over us and through us and among us, wearing down the sharp rocks of despair to bring joy in the morning. Thank you for the good earth beneath us, around us, and within us. May we take this clay and co-create a new realm of justice and beauty. Thank you for all these and more. We accept our gifts, and commit to building, sculpting, painting, singing, and dancing them to life, to abundant life. So be it. Blessed be. And amen.
And now I invite us to rise in body and or in spirit to sing together our closing hymn, number 12, O Life that maketh all things new.
If you are who you were, if the person next to you is who they were, if none of us has changed since the day we came here, we have failed. The purpose of this community, of any church, temple, zendo, mosque, is to help its people grow. We do this through encounters with the unknown, in ourselves, in one another, in the other, whoever that might be for us, however hard that might be. Because these encounters have many gifts to offer. So may you go forth from here today, not who you were, but who you could be. So may we all. Blessed be. Go in peace. And please be at rest for the postlude.